I never imagined that a single mistake, something so small, so innocent, could lead to such a nightmare. My 6-year-old daughter, unaware of the chaos she was about to trigger, simply sat in the wrong chair. That was all it took. In an instant, my sister Caroline's face twisted with rage, her hands shaking with fury. Before I could react, she grabbed a heavy glass jug from the table, her fingers gripping it so tightly that her knuckles turned white. And then, with all her strength, she smashed it against my daughter's head. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the ballroom. Blood. Screams. And what happened next was even worse. My name is Grace Walker, and I am 32 years old. I am a widow and a single mother, raising my 6-year-old daughter on my own. Life has tested me in more ways than I can count, but no matter how hard things get, I fight every single day for my daughter. She is my world, my reason to keep going. I live in West Haven, a city that is both beautiful and relentless. It is a place where ambition thrives, where towering skyscrapers shadow quiet neighborhoods, and where people measure success by the size of their bank accounts. But for me, West Haven is simply home. It is where I work as an accountant, where I tuck my daughter into bed each night, and where I have built a life, one step at a time. I do not live in a mansion or drive the latest luxury car, but I have something far more precious, a peaceful home and a daughter who fills it with laughter. 6 years ago, my world changed forever. My husband died in an accident, leaving me to navigate life alone with our daughter. The pain of losing him never truly fades, but I have learned to live with it. Since that day, I have dedicated my life to protecting my little girl, ensuring she has a childhood free from the struggles I faced. This evening, like so many others, I sat in our small but cozy apartment, watching the golden sunlight spill through the windows. My daughter sat beside me, her tiny hands gripping a pencil as she worked on her homework. She let out a sigh, her dark curls falling over her face as she stared at a particularly difficult math problem. "Mom, this problem is too hard," she murmured, frustration evident in her voice. I smiled and gently brushed her hair away from her face. "Let's figure it out together, sweetheart," I said, pulling her closer. Balancing work and motherhood has never been easy, but I have always believed that as long as we have each other, we will be okay. What I did not know was that our world was about to shatter once again. Just as I was about to help my daughter with her math problem, my phone rang, the sudden sound shattering the quiet evening. I glanced at the screen, my heart immediately tensing at the name flashing across it. Caroline Wilson. I hesitated before answering. Caroline was my younger sister, but over the years, she had become a stranger to me. We had once been close. After our parents died in a car accident, I had taken care of her, sacrificing my own comfort to make sure she finished college. But that was a long time ago. Caroline had changed. Success had transformed her into someone I barely recognized. She had climbed the ranks in the financial world, becoming a top investment trader, earning more money than I could ever dream of. And with her wealth came an arrogance that made it impossible to have a normal relationship with her. She looked down on my life, my job, and the simple way I raised my daughter. Taking a deep breath, I pressed the answer button. "Caroline?" Her voice came through the speaker, bright, excited, and just a little too eager. "Grace, I have amazing news." I leaned back, already bracing myself. "What is it?" "Michael proposed," she announced, her voice bubbling with excitement. "I'm getting married." I blinked, absorbing the news. Michael Stanford, the wealthy tech executive she had been dating, was now her fiancé. "That's big news," I said, keeping my voice neutral. Caroline barely paused before launching into her next statement. "And this won't be just any wedding. It's going to be the wedding of the year. $1 million event at the Lodge at Torrey Pines. The best catering, the most exclusive guest list. NBC, CBS, and Fox are all covering it." I rubbed my forehead, already feeling exhausted. This was so typical of her. Everything had to be about status, luxury, and proving to the world that she was superior. "That sounds extravagant," I replied carefully. She let out a soft, knowing laugh. "Of course it is. I deserve this, Grace. I worked my way up from nothing. And now, I finally have the life I always wanted. I stayed silent, letting her words hang in the air. Then, she got to the real reason for her call. You and my niece have to be there, obviously. I stiffened. Caroline. I started, but she cut me off. It'll be good for you, she said smoothly. Maybe being around successful people will inspire you to want more from life. Don't you want to show your daughter that there's more out there? My fingers tightened around the phone. There it was. The subtle insult hidden under fake concern. Before I could answer, my daughter looked up from her homework, tilting her head curiously. Mom, who is it? Your Aunt Caroline, I told her. She wants us to go to her wedding. My daughter thought about this for a moment, then scrunched her nose. Do we have to? I let out a small chuckle at her innocent honesty. But deep down, I had the same question. I had a terrible feeling about this wedding. Something about Caroline's voice, her excitement. It didn't sit right with me. But I had no idea just how much worse it would get. 2 months later, I found myself sitting in a lavish private suite at the lodge at Torrey Pines, watching my younger sister transform into someone I barely recognized. The room itself was a statement of luxury: polished marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean, and plush velvet chairs arranged around a grand mahogany table. The atmosphere smelled of fresh white orchids, luxury perfume, and champagne. I sat quietly in a corner, my 6-year-old daughter beside me, her small fingers clutching my hand as she nervously scanned the extravagant surroundings. Caroline stood in the center of the suite, surrounded by a team of high-end wedding planners from Beverly Hills, her voice sharp and commanding as she listed off her demands. I need the floral arrangements to be Jeff Letham's work. Nothing less. And the table centerpieces must have fresh white orchids, exclusively imported. My Vera Wang dress is custom-made for $1 million, so I need everything in this wedding to match that level of perfection. I exhaled slowly, trying not to react. Every word out of her mouth was a display of excess. She had built her life on proving she was above everyone else. As the wedding planners scrambled to take notes, Caroline flipped through a portfolio of decoration ideas, her manicured nails tapping against the pages. The catering is already set with a 3-Michelin star chef. The guest list is finalized. NBC, CBS, and Fox have confirmed media coverage. My wedding will be the event of the year. Her fiancé, Michael, stood near the doorway, watching her with an expression I couldn't quite place. Was it concern? Doubt? Exhaustion? Maybe all three. I had been sitting there for nearly an hour, but she hadn't asked me a single thing about myself or my daughter. To her, I was just a spectator in her grand performance. Then, out of nowhere, Caroline's sharp eyes locked onto my daughter. "Oh, sweetheart," she suddenly cooed, stepping toward her with a forced warmth. "You have a special role in my wedding." My daughter flinched slightly, pressing closer to me. "I do?" she asked hesitantly. Caroline's smile stretched wide. "Yes. You'll be part of the ceremony, standing up front with me, dressed in the most beautiful gown. The cameras will love you." I immediately knew this was a terrible idea. "She's not comfortable with that, Caroline," I interjected, my tone calm but firm. "She's a little shy in front of crowds." Caroline's smile froze. Her eyes flicked toward me, her expression turning cold in an instant. "Oh, come on, Grace," she said with an edge of irritation. "You're always holding her back, just like you hold yourself back." I stiffened. There it was again, that judgment, that condescension. Before I could respond, my daughter clutched my hand tightly and shook her head. "I don't want to," she whispered. I turned to my sister and repeated, "She doesn't want to do it." Caroline's fingers curled into fists, her body rigid with frustration. "You're raising her to be weak," she muttered, her voice dangerously low. A heavy silence fell over the room. The wedding planners awkwardly avoided eye contact, and Michael shifted uncomfortably near the doorway. I could feel something breaking inside Caroline, like a crack in a perfectly polished surface, something unhinged slipping through. She took a slow breath, forcing a tight smile. "Fine," she said, her voice sweet but laced with something dangerous. But don't come crying to me when she grows up to be a nobody. I didn't react. I simply stood up, gently guiding my daughter toward the door. Come on, sweetheart. We're leaving. And as we walked away, I could feel Caroline's eyes burning into my back. Something was wrong with her. And deep down, I knew this wedding was going to end in disaster. The morning of the wedding arrived with an uneasy stillness, as if the world itself sensed that something was about to go horribly wrong. The lodge at Torrey Pines was alive with movement. Luxury hotel staff rushed through the hallways, carrying trays of gourmet dishes and bottles of champagne. Florists arranged the last of the imported white orchids, while event coordinators checked and rechecked the elaborate decorations. Despite the grandeur, there was an undeniable tension in the air. I stood in one of the guest suites, helping my daughter into her dress. Her small fingers fidgeted nervously with the delicate fabric as she looked up at me with worried eyes.
Mom?
I don't want to be here, she whispered. I crouched down beside her, brushing her dark curls behind her ears. I know, sweetheart. We'll stay for a little while, and then we'll leave. I promise. She nodded hesitantly, but her discomfort was clear. From down the hallway, a sharp voice cut through the air like a blade. Where is the media? Why isn't Fox here yet? I paid for full coverage. I exhaled slowly. Caroline. Her bridal suite was filled with chaos. As I passed by the open doorway, I saw her reflection in the mirror, her face twisted in frustration as her makeup artists frantically reapplied powder to her already pale skin. Despite her $1 million Vera Wang gown, her beauty was overshadowed by something else: exhaustion, paranoia, and obsession. Her fiancé, Michael, stood near the entrance, his hands shoved into his pockets, his expression tight with unease. His mother, Linda Stanford, hovered nearby, her face carefully neutral, but I could tell she was deeply uncomfortable. Caroline, calm down, Michael said in a quiet but firm voice. Everything is fine. Caroline whipped around, her eyes flashing with something almost unhinged. No, it's not fine. This is supposed to be the wedding of the decade. And it's falling apart. She grabbed a glass of champagne from the counter, taking a large gulp before turning back to the mirror. Her hands were shaking. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, barely hidden beneath layers of expensive makeup. Her skin glistened with an unnatural sheen of cold sweat, and there was something off about the way she moved, erratic, unstable. The wedding planners moved around her carefully, as if handling a ticking time bomb. As I watched from the hallway, an unsettling realization settled in my stomach. Caroline was not okay, and this day was about to go terribly, terribly wrong. The ceremony hall was breathtaking: gold-trimmed chairs, a ceiling covered in hanging white orchids, and an ocean view that stretched endlessly beyond the glass walls. Guests dressed in the finest designer suits and gowns had begun to take their seats, chatting quietly while camera crews adjusted their equipment. The room was designed to be perfect, but perfection doesn't last. I stood near the back of the hall, holding my daughter's hand as we waited for the ceremony to begin. She was restless, shifting uncomfortably in her dress. That's when it happened. She let go of my hand and, without thinking, looked for a seat. She walked a few steps forward and, not realizing what she was doing, sat down on an empty chair near the front. A chair with a name tag on it. Caroline's chair. I hadn't noticed at first, but Caroline did. From across the room, her entire body stiffened. The soft murmur of conversation around us faded as Caroline's expression twisted into something horrifying. For a single, terrifying second, there was silence. Then she snapped. Caroline's heels clacked sharply against the marble floor as she stormed across the hall, her breathing ragged, her eyes wild. Guests froze in confusion, watching as the bride of the hour moved with terrifying speed toward a small child. Before I could react, before I could even register what was happening, Caroline was there. "Get up," she shrieked, her voice cutting through the air like a whip. "That's my chair." My daughter jumped, startled, her wide eyes filling with panic as she scrambled to stand. I'm sorry," she whispered, stepping back. But Caroline wasn't satisfied. Her rage boiled over, exploding into something violent and uncontrollable. She grabbed a heavy glass jug from the nearest table, and before anyone could stop her, she swung it down, smashing it against my daughter's head. The sound of shattering glass rang through the ballroom. For a brief, horrifying moment, the entire room fell into stunned silence. Then, my daughter let out a blood-curdling scream. She collapsed to the floor, blood streaming down the side of her head, and chaos erupted. Screams filled the ballroom. Gasps of shock and horrified whispers rippled through the elegantly dressed guests. The soft classical music playing in the background was drowned out by the deafening sound of panic. I felt my entire body freeze for a second as I watched my daughter collapse, clutching her small hands against the side of her head, where blood now trickled down her face, staining her dress red. Then my instincts kicked in. "No!" I screamed, dropping to my knees beside her. "Baby, I'm here. I've got you." My hands trembled as I pressed against the wound, desperately trying to stop the bleeding. My daughter whimpered, her tiny fingers gripping my dress as she sobbed uncontrollably. "Mommy, it hurts," she cried, her voice weak. Tears blurred my vision as I stroked her hair. "I know, sweetheart, I know. You're going to be okay. Just hold on." But as I cradled my daughter, my heart pounding in sheer terror, Caroline stood above us, calm, eerily composed. She smirked. "That'll teach her," she muttered under her breath, brushing off invisible dust from her expensive gown. I looked up at her in absolute disbelief. "You monster!" I roared, my entire body shaking with fury. Guests were still frozen in shock, unsure whether to step forward or keep their distance. The hotel staff whispered frantically, scrambling for napkins, bandages, anything to help. And then, from the other side of the ballroom, a firm voice cut through the chaos. "Someone call the police." It was one of the hotel managers, his face pale with horror as he pulled out his phone. Caroline's smirk immediately dropped. "Wait, no. There's no need for that," she snapped, turning to the staff. "It was just an accident." But no one believed her. Michael, her fiancé, stood nearby, his face a mask of disgust and disbelief. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he muttered. "You just attacked a child." For the first time, a flicker of realization crossed Caroline's face. She turned to the guests, her eyes darting frantically between them. "I didn't mean it." She was in my chair. "She disrespected me. But her words were drowned out by the sound of police sirens wailing outside the venue. The ballroom doors burst open. 3 uniformed police officers stormed inside, their expressions hard and unreadable as they scanned the scene. The lead officer stepped forward, his gaze falling on Caroline, still standing near the broken shards of glass. "Caroline Wilson," his voice was firm. "Step away from the child and place your hands where we can see them." Caroline froze, her body going rigid. "Wait, no. You don't understand," she protested. "I didn't mean to." She was sitting in my seat. One of the officers turned toward me, his voice gentler. "Ma'am, is this your daughter?" I nodded frantically, tears still streaming down my face. "Yes." Caroline attacked her. She hit her with a glass jug. The officer gave a brief nod before turning back to Caroline. "You are under arrest for aggravated assault on a minor." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Caroline's face twisted in horror as the reality of the situation finally sank in. "No. You can't do this to me," she shrieked, taking a step back. "I'm Caroline Wilson. I have connections. Do you know who I am?" The officers didn't flinch. One of them stepped forward, swiftly pulling Caroline's arms behind her back and securing them in handcuffs with a sharp metallic click. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The guests were dead silent. Everyone watched as Caroline thrashed against the officers, her face contorted in pure rage. "Michael," she screamed, twisting toward her fiancé. "Say something. Help me." Michael met her gaze with nothing but cold indifference. "I should have seen this coming," he murmured. "You're not the woman I thought you were." Caroline let out a choked sob, her body finally going limp as the officers pulled her toward the exit. As they dragged her away, her eyes locked onto mine one final time. "Grace, you have to help me. We're sisters," she cried. I stood up slowly, my hands still stained with my daughter's blood. My entire body shook with exhaustion, rage, and something else, a final, irreversible severing of whatever bond we once shared. I met her gaze without an ounce of sympathy. "You are no longer my sister." And then, the officers pulled her away, leading her out the ballroom doors. Her screams echoed through the hallway until, finally, they disappeared. She was gone. And she was never coming back. The moment Caroline was gone, the reality of what had just happened hit me like a tidal wave. I turned back to my daughter, still whimpering weakly in my arms, her head bandaged hastily by the paramedics who had arrived moments earlier. One of the medics crouched beside me. "Ma'am, we need to take her to the hospital immediately." I nodded frantically, barely able to form words. Please help her." They carefully lifted my daughter onto a stretcher, securing her while I climbed into the ambulance beside her. Michael stepped forward, his expression filled with guilt and regret. "Grace, I am so sorry." But I couldn't even process his words. My only concern was my daughter. As the ambulance doors closed and the sirens blared, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. Caroline had hurt my child, and I was going to make sure she paid for it. The waiting room of West Haven General Hospital was silent except for the occasional beeping of heart monitors and the soft shuffle of nurses passing by. The air smelled of disinfectant and worry. I sat on the edge of a stiff chair, my hands gripping a paper cup of untouched coffee, my heart hammering with anxiety. Inside the hospital room, my 6-year-old daughter lay on the bed, her small frame wrapped in a pale blue blanket. A thick bandage covered the side of her head where the glass jug had shattered against her skull, and in 4 drip ran into her tiny arm. The doctor had assured me the injury was not life-threatening. She had needed stitches and there was swelling, but she would physically recover. Emotionally, however, the damage would take much longer to heal. I sat beside her, brushing my fingers through her curls, watching as her chest rose and fell in sleep. The image of her collapsing, bleeding on the ballroom floor haunted me. That night, as I sat there, I made a decision. I was going to make sure Caroline never had the chance to hurt anyone again. The next morning, after speaking with the doctors, I left my daughter with a trusted nurse and headed straight to the West Haven Police Department. When I stepped into the station, I felt the weight of what I was about to do, but I didn't hesitate. I filed a legal case against Caroline Wilson. The charges were severe: aggravated assault on a minor, reckless endangerment, public violence. Since the attack had been caught on camera, with over 300 witnesses, the case moved quickly. There was no room for Caroline to twist the story in her favor. But as the investigation deepened, more of Caroline's dark secrets came to light. A week after Caroline's arrest, the police held a press conference outside the courthouse. The entire city was watching as the head investigator stepped forward, flipping open a case file filled with shocking evidence. Caroline had been hiding over $50 million in trading losses at her investment firm. She had engaged in illegal stock manipulation, defrauding clients, and violating federal trading laws. A search of her penthouse apartment had uncovered large amounts of cocaine and prescription pills, proving she had been heavily using drugs. Multiple employees at her firm came forward, testifying that Caroline had become erratic, paranoid, and verbally abusive in the months leading up to the wedding. The media had a field day. Millionaire trader Caroline Wilson arrested for assault and financial crimes. The fall of West Haven's elite. Caroline Wilson's secret life exposed. From success to scandal, a trader's greed, violence, and drug addiction. She had spent years building a perfect image, and in one night, it had all crumbled. Her ex-fiancé, Michael Stanford, wasted no time cutting ties. At a press conference, standing beside his mother Linda, he faced the cameras with a cold, expressionless face. "I want to make it very clear," he said, his voice firm. "I have ended my engagement with Caroline Wilson, effective immediately." He went on to reveal that Caroline's mental state had been deteriorating for months, that she had shown paranoia and violent mood swings, but he had ignored the warning signs. The scandal destroyed her reputation. The social circles that once worshipped her erased her name overnight. Months later, I sat inside a cold, silent courtroom, my daughter sitting beside me, her small fingers clutched in mine. Caroline was led inside, wearing an orange prison jumpsuit, her once perfect manicured nails now unpolished, her hair messy, her face pale and thin. She looked like a ghost of herself. Her lawyer tried to argue that she had been under severe stress, that she had lost control, that she never meant to hurt my daughter. But the judge didn't buy it. There was no excuse for attacking a child. Caroline Wilson, the judge's voice rang out, you are sentenced to 12 years in state prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 8 years. A hush fell over the courtroom. Caroline's mouth fell open. No, Ano. You can't do this. The judge ignored her outburst. Additionally, you are ordered to pay full restitution for your financial crimes. You will undergo mandatory psychiatric evaluation. This court finds you guilty of assault and fraud. Tears streamed down Caroline's face as the guards moved toward her. She whipped her head toward me, desperation in her eyes. Grace, please. We're family. You have to help me. I looked her dead in the eyes, my voice calm, steady, and final. You are no longer my sister. The guards grabbed her arms, handcuffing her once again. As they led her out of the courtroom, her screams echoed through the halls. She was gone. And this time, she wasn't coming back. The past year had felt like a lifetime. I stood in the kitchen of our new home in West Haven, stirring a pot of oatmeal as the morning sun filtered through the window. The air smelled of fresh coffee and cinnamon, a scent that had become part of our quiet, peaceful mornings. On the other side of the kitchen, my 6-year-old daughter sat at the dining table, her tiny legs swinging beneath the chair as she colored in her notebook. Her hair had fully grown back, her stitches had long since healed, and her once frequent nightmares had begun to fade. She still had moments where she hesitated in crowded places, where she instinctively flinched at sudden loud noises, but she was smiling again. And that was all that mattered. She looked up at me suddenly, holding up a piece of paper. Mom, look, I got 100 on my math test. I turned, a genuine smile spreading across my face. That's amazing, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you. She beamed, her face lighting up with pride as she placed the test carefully back in her folder. This was what I had fought for. A normal, happy life. As I reached for my coffee mug, my gaze fell to the kitchen counter, where a small pile of letters sat unopened. Caroline had been sending letters from prison, writing to me every few weeks. The first letters had been filled with rage and denial. I was set up. You betrayed me. You ruined my life, Grace. But as the months passed, the letters changed. Her words softened, shifting from anger to regret. The most recent letter, still unopened, had a short message scrawled across the envelope. Please read this one. I need you to know the truth. I picked it up, running my fingers over the edge. For a brief moment, I considered opening it. But then, I thought about my daughter, about the life we had built, free from the chaos and pain of the past. I placed the letter back on the counter, unopened. I would never forgive Caroline for what she had done. Some things were simply unforgivable. That afternoon, my daughter and I walked through the local farmer's market, picking out fresh vegetables and stopping by the small bakery where the owner always gave her a free cookie. She skipped ahead of me, her laughter ringing through the air as she held a tiny loaf of bread in her hands, giggling as she pretended it was a microphone. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. The weight of the past had finally lifted, and in its place was something new, hope. Caroline's chapter in our lives was over. She would spend years behind bars, left to reflect on everything she had lost. But we had everything ahead of us. A future filled with love, safety, and happiness. And that was all that mattered. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more content like this, don't forget to like this post to show your support. Comment your thoughts. What did you think about the story? Did any part resonate with you? Subscribe to stay updated with more gripping and emotional stories. Your engagement helps bring more powerful stories to life. Thank you for watching.